Hi guys, week number 11, and I hope you had a great weekend. I'm gonna start as always and go over some feedback based on what you submitted, and I have my notes right here. And I'll have a couple of announcements and I'll finish up chapter 11 for this week. And I'm also going to submit the link for chapter 12 that our amazing TAs have led. So have led the presentation of it. So I'm going to include all that information and a little bit more actually in that email that I'm going to send out right after this. So LO 28, 93%, very well. And LO 19, 91%, very, very well too. One item that I want to address in LO 19, and I was a little bit surprised that most of you didn't get this one right, was about plyometric exercises and that are designed for muscular endurance. Endurance or power? Okay. So today, as I said, we're going to finish up chapter 11. I'm going to throw in the link for chapter 12 so you have it for next week as well. And there is no office hours this week because there's more advising. So if you are one of my advisees, please fill out that form that's circulating and let's visit. I'm going to go ahead and share our Moodle site because I want to talk about a couple of things. So I think that's one. All right. So I'm gonna finish up chapter 11 today, and I was supposed to start chapter 12, but I'm gonna upload the whole link because it goes into next week. Now, the important stuff. Synchronous meeting the following week on Tuesday. That's fine. But as you can see, the first two groups are submitting their PDOs. Now, I hope you're working on them, okay? And I want to make sure we're on the same page because you haven't really reached out with questions, especially those two groups. So I'm kind of wondering if everything is okay. And so these two groups right here, group 1 and 2, right? All these names right here, all the way. Are you okay? Do you have questions? Are there any concerns? Reach out, okay? Please do reach out because next week you need to submit your PDO. The other groups are the following week after, so in 2 weeks from now, but especially groups 1 and 2, reach out if you have questions, right? You need to be working on those things. So if for any reason you haven't, please start now. And also if you have questions, reach out. I cannot know how to help you if I don't know if you need any help. Okay? All right, I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page with that. And I'll just go back here. And yeah, so here we are. Finishing up chapter 11, uploading chapter 12. Then for next week, you have LO 13 and LO 14. The two groups have their PDOs. Then nothing else for the first groups. The other groups, though, they have their PDOs, right? We'll have a synchronous meeting on next week on Tuesday and that week on Wednesday. And then we have a review. We'll talk about that and then final week. So again, we are on week 11 out of 15. And some major assessments, AKA PDOs, are coming up. So please do what you need to do. I'll help you as much as I can, but you need to meet me halfway. All right? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to start sharing the PowerPoint. Do I have anything else? No. All right. All right. Yeah. So we're starting with Parkinson's disease. And as you can see, I've got my clicker. So as you can see, Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disease, which means that unfortunately some parts of our brain die. Okay, and because of that, of course, there are going to be several kind of other issues. I just wanted to make sure we understand what that is. You see that is a lot of individuals, and it is a progressive neurological disorders. We'll talk about they will have motor and non-motor symptoms, but unfortunately, it's chronic and progressive. Okay. Okay. So you saw some of the symptoms right here. More are explained here. Bradykinesia. So it has to do with movement. The kinesia part, brady means slower movements. You can go to hypokinesia, which is moving less than what we're supposed to, right? Quantitatively and qualitatively. And akinesia is pretty much when we don't move. Okay, it's really hard to initiate the movements. Freezing, impaired balance, posture instability. We'll see all those things as we go. Dyskinesia is when there is difficulty, right, to move, and that's through overactivity of muscles, and we have those specific movements that we have with PD. Rigidity, that's stiffness, and contractions. We're going to talk about contractions, a little bit deformity, all of this. Okay, just make sure you know those symptoms. Okay, so Hahn and Yahr. So that's an old scale. We still use it, and it shows where we are. If we have PD, obviously stage 5 is the worst. Stage 0, we don't have. We have asymptomatic, no signs of disease, which is the best. I'm going to say it one more time, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper later on. We have motor and non-motor signs and symptoms, okay? A lot of people think about motor only, but we have non-motor as well. And we're going to talk about this in a second. Okay. Unknown cause. Yes, some of the symptoms affect movement, and that's really important to know. Levodopa. Levodopa is classic medication, and it has to do with dopamine, because people with PD, there's an association with dopamine levels. And levodopa is the drug that changes into dopamine in the brain. So it kind of helps with the situation. And sometimes the patient may take it with carbidopa, which helps with with what we're trying to do is to avoid breakdown of a levodopa and in the bloodstream, so we have more levodopa in the brain, so we can use it there. That's why we're using carbidopa, and that's why a lot of times we use them both. Sometimes we need to go into surgical treatment, especially as we're moving towards stage 5, and one way to do it was DPS, deep brain stimulation. We have, why is exercise important? Because we can decrease or delay secondary sequelae of anything that comes with Parkinson, including musculoskeletal, affecting musculoskeletal and the cardiorespiratory systems. It helps with maintaining benefits, and also it can actually go into the source, maybe pretty much of the issue, and protect the nervous system, right? Which is really important. Now, when we talk about exercise testing, we have to evaluate the cardiovascular risk first. Also, you see a lot of other tests, balance, gait, general mobility, and so on and so forth. All this have to be explored, investigated before we pick any kind of static or dynamic kind of test. And you see a lot of tests here and here as well. The basic idea is it's a case-by-case scenario. So we investigate the the case of each patient, and then we decide accordingly. Now we have BP abnormalities, because that's how Parkinson's disease is, and also because of the medication, we have to make sure that we take that into consideration. For or above stage, they may not be able to do a great exercise test, so maybe we need to do a radionuclide stress test or a stress ECG to substitute that. So again, it depends on the situation. And the protocol, if we're talking about, we need to make sure that they're safe, and fatigue is an issue with PD, so we need to be careful in the final stages of the training protocol. You know, they need to be assisted in a way at some point. Symptom limited exercise testing is very common. What is a symptom limited exercise testing in general? It's a test that will we will stop once we see a symptom, right? Orthostatic hypotension may be an issue. I hope you remember what that is. If you don't, look it up. GXT also should be performed when we have that peak medication effect, which is good. Now, as you can see over here, I'm going to move this a little bit. If we're talking about DBS, right? We're talking about DBS, we may have an issue of the signal from DBS and the signal that the ECG is recording. So the theory says, okay, deactivate DBS, so the ECG recording is more accurate, but then if you deactivate DBS, we may have other issues. So we really need to consider that as we go, and as again, a case-by-case scenario. So we don't have any adverse effects because of the exercise interacting with the medication. Goals of exercise, you see a lot of important things: delay disability, prevent secondary complications, improve quality of life as PD progresses, because it won't progress. Key health outcomes, so what are we specifically looking for? Gait transfers, balance, and joint mobility and muscle power. All right, here, I'll go a little bit closer so I can see. Nothing exceptionally fancy. I would just stick a little bit to the type of resistant exercise. So if it's not safe, avoid free weights, okay? These are the neuromotor exercises. So here we need to include challenging physical activities. And there are some examples: Tai Chi, Tango, Waltz. They have been proven to be beneficial for improving balance in patients with PD. Clinical presentation is important, again, as we understand before picking the type of exercise. Now, resistance training, emphasize extensor muscles of the trunk and the hip to prevent false posture and all major muscles of lower extremities to maintain mobility, okay? That's what we're focusing on. Here, these slides are kind of repeating some of the information that we just saw in that table. Flexibility, upper extremities and trunk, as well as all major joints. Spinal mobility, axial rotation, that's important. Neck flexibility is super important, okay? And functional exercise, again, because you want to maintain that high quality of everyday life. What else do we have here? Yes, even if change in medication, that we may get responses that we don't expect. And now we have, as you see that last sentence, several non-motor symptoms may burden exercise performance. And the next slide we'll talk about things like that. But when we talk about, a lot of people think about, as I said, and that's important for you to remember, is that, you know, Parkinson, it has motor symptoms. Yes, what about the non-motor? You know, it has to do with pain, sleep, fatigue, low blood pressure, restless legs, sweating, bladder problems. So you see there are a lot of issues. Actually, there may be more issues because of the non-motor symptoms. And high variability in the outcomes of whatever training we prescribe. Decline in dementia, that's another non-motor, which of course, cognitive decline in dementia will affect pretty much everything. Fall prevention, reduction, and education is important as well. So they have to be part of the exercise program, balance training. And if they cannot multitask, avoid it until they can. Fatigue is an issue with resistive exercise. It's not that we shouldn't do resistive exercise, just make sure we address it, because that is an issue with PED patients. Talked about fall history, and cueing is important as well, because it can improve the exercise. All right, the second chronic condition for today, and then at the very end, we're going to talk about what we're going to do if we have more than one chronic condition or multiple chronic conditions. So here we have SCI, okay? Important in general here to remember and think is the lesion level, okay? Where are we going to get hit? The higher, the more severe, okay? The lower, the less severe. It affects less portion of our body, if you want me to put it in this very simplistic way. So you see that if we get hit really high, cervical section, we're talking about tetraplegia, right? Affects all four limbs. If it's below that, we're talking about paraplegia, so not affecting all four limbs. Okay, so most likely not your hands. And then it depends on how high you got hit, right? Where's the lesion? 50% of those lesions are C lesions, so which is bad, right? And 80% of those are in males. So just to know some statistics. Very traumatic if it happens at an early age. Now, because they are at high risk of development of secondary complications, and you see all this parenthesis, that's why that's something very important to know and to address, okay? And that's why we're talking about this, or one of the main reasons we're talking about this today. This is broken down the next slides by, sorry about that, where the lesions are. And again, you will see that the higher we go, the more problems we have. So we have the L2 from L2 to S2, for example, lack voluntary control of the bladder. T6 to L2. Now we're talking about respiratory motor control issues, right? T1 to T6, thermoregulation, orthostatic hypotension, autonomic dysreflection, okay? What is autonomic dysreflection? So it is associated with, I'm not going to go into the details, there's another slide as we go, but we have a sudden high increase of blood pressure, okay? Because of that, because of our nervous system is not working very well, I'll put it that way right now. Now, C5 to C8, tetraplegic, we're getting higher. And above C4, the patient cannot even breathe. So again, the higher, the worse the condition, okay? An assessment, of course, you know about a patient, what they can do and what they cannot. That's really important. We have to pick an exercise that they can engage as more muscle as possible. Stationary wheelchair, of course, motor-driven treadmill system, yeah, if we have that, and we can just adjust the wheelchair, sure. Nothing too fancy here. Make sure you address possible post-exercise hypotension and exhaustion. Assessment of muscular strength has to do with there's no special to do here when we are assessing that. But of course, the main thing again is the lesion level. Okay. Joint contractures. What's that? Okay. So here we're talking about the joints, and we have an inability to move a joint through the full range of motion. Okay, because of all these reasons. So stretching is important, and promoting muscular imbalance around the joints is important. We're gonna go a little bit deeper about that in a second as well. But make sure you understand that they may develop joint contractures. All right, so going a little bit closer here. Active stretching preferred passive stretching. If not, as you can see, that's the type of flexibility. Type of aerobic is they engage the largest muscle possible, right? And we're going to talk about the FESLC model in a little bit that you've seen there. In resistance exercise that they can use, of course. So the type is something that you should be focusing on when you are reading this table. Paretic arm is the arm, or the part. Paretic is the one that doesn't move, that has the issue, right? So if you can, in a way, strap them on something and they can move them even passively, or as much as they can, that would be great. There is that imbalance between pushing and pulling. So there's more pushing and less pulling. So we need to address that. And as you can see at the bottom, when we're talking about resistance exercise, we could we could increase the resistance, but also after, if everything is well with tolerance levels, we should increase the volume as well. Advanced exercises when it's appropriate, but also, of course, therapeutic exercises, because we have all these issues that we have with muscle imbalance and spasticity. Slow stretch, because we don't want to have any kind of reflexes going on there, so it's nice and slowly. Stretch spastic muscles, because they're always in a state that we have really high tone. Pain tolerance is important as we progress through the range of motion. They have to empty their bowels because autonomic dysreflexion, so they cannot really control. A lot of times there's an issue with the nervous system, as we talked about, right? Skin pressure shores. And above T6, we should anticipate low cardiovascular performance. We talked about the autonomic dysreflexia that has to do with the release of catecholamines that increases HR, VO2, BP, and excess capacity. I talked about autonomic dysreflexia in association with high sudden increases of blood pressure. We should be aware of that, and we may need to know what to do as an emergency. Also, you see athletes with a resting SBP equal or above to 180 should not allow to start an event. More fatigue, muscular fatigue for the unfit before maybe actually get whatever threshold they need to get to be stimulated cardiovascularly. Standing history, that's important to take into consideration. If they have tetraplegia, especially, you see all these things we could use, such as anti-thromboembolic stockings, right? Elastic abdominal binder, electrical stimulation, recumbent posture. Again, the main idea, engage the largest possible muscle mass. This is the FESLC I talked about. So sometimes, in some cases, we may go hybrid, especially above 212, meaning that, yes, we will do, for example, some kind of arm ergometry, because they can, but also we would combine it with some electrical stimulations on the legs, okay? And if you go online and look for something like that, you'll see some specific devices that are out there that could be used for those patients. Yes, if we can take them off the chair and they can do something off the wheelchair, sure, definitely. But we need to be careful when we're the transfers. That's what we call by transfers, from and to the wheelchair, right? Shoulder imbalance, that's important, so we need to address that as well. And when we have some imbalance around a joint, we talked about that before, right? The stronger muscle has to be stretched and the weaker muscle has to be strengthened. Say it again, the stronger muscles need to be stretched and the weaker muscles must be strengthened, okay? Okay, tenodesis. Let me give you an example. So, bottle of water. I'm going to show you, especially with people who have tetraplegia and they cannot really control their fingers, this is what they're going to do. You see here it says active wrist extensor. So what they're doing is they're going to grab it, they're going to put their arm above it, and then they're going to extend the wrist. By extending the wrist, the fingers grab the bottle, and that's how a lot of times they move stuff. They grab stuff and they move them. So what they're doing is they're extending the wrist, and then without really doing anything, the fingers are flexing and holding the thing. So they may put, I'm giving you an example, they may put their hand on the bottle, right? And then do this, just putting it in front of my face, but they just extend the wrist, and then the fingers are just grabbing it, and then they can move it, okay? That's what it is. It's just a technique for them, especially if they cannot control their fingers, to pretty much be more independent, okay? Lower sweat rates, that should be something that we should know, and not push them based on the sweat rate per se, because they have lower. All right, now, this is pretty simple. What do we do if we have multiple chronic conditions or diseases? What do we do? Okay. The basic idea is, of course, whatever we do, we need to know that there will be a variability on the impact on the conditions. So that's one thing that we should expect. But the main idea is we begin exercise prescription for the single disease and health condition that confers the greatest risk and or is the more limiting regarding ADL. Okay. Also, we ask them and we consider their preferences and goals. That's one way. And in an alternative way, we start with the most conservative. What does that mean? So we have three conditions, and one is do cardio three times. The first one is 3 times per week. The second one is 3 times per week. And the last one is 2 times per week. We go with the 2 times per week because that's the most conservative, and we don't want to push it. Because 3 will be a lot for that last condition we have. Does that make sense? So we have 3 conditions, and the suggestion is guideline 3 times per week resistance training for the first one, 3 times for the second one, but 2 times per week for the third one. So we pick the frequency of the third one, because if we pick the 3 times per week, it would be too much for that third condition we have. That's the conservative way. So either this way, the greater risk, or the most conservative. That's it. We finished chapter 11. We did it. I know it was a huge chapter, right? So yeah, I'm gonna upload what I need to upload. Remember, you have to submit a load 30 to 32. And those 2 groups, please let me know if you have anything, because you need to submit your PDOs, okay? All right, guys. I may see you tomorrow advising. In the meantime, lift intentionally, not habitually.